Is she pointing that out? What do you mean by that?
Like what feels like it's being mirrored is like I'm fearing she's not going to be available. And she's like, I'm always available.
Mm. And so what's the part about, you mean you're saying your experience of not wanting to be available for others made you for a moment doubt whether she would be available to you?
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting where my mind goes with it. I don't know if this is useful, but when you're on an expansive path, so in the not too distant future, there are going to be plenty of people who want attention, who you really just don't have the ability. You need to touch a lot of people, not the micro. So there's going to be a lot of no called for. Maybe she can help in those moments, like with a kind of grace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that feel right?
Yeah.
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 Good. Yeah, she probably has that kind of self-respect access to it so that it doesn't feel like
it's also, it's kind. But it's like, it's a kindness, but also like a don't fuck.
Yeah.
With me.
Yeah. Those are the best kind of boundaries, right? Like somebody doesn't even know it's happening, but that kind of like spiritual jujitsu, that is like shadows can do that. Like we really can't. We're like limited by like the time I hurt my mother's feelings and then was punished for it for, 6 years. And like that stuff kicks in while being human. But so then the next thing that I would do with you and people I work with, one of the tools, it's a Phil Stutz tool, is what we would do, and I was doing this with my own shadows, was just saying, so long as we use this moment, because there's risk, right? Anytime we put ourselves out into the world, it feels risky. Life calls for that. So we want to move in the direction of expansion always. That's what feels good. I mean, I'm technically in the business of helping people feel better, but what actually feels good isn't just like making amends with your personal darkness. It's moving forward in the direction of your potential. Well, if you're in an ego, there's going to be a lot of resistance. Like, and that's going to show up as procrastination and ADHD and, impulsive shopping, everything to pull you away from moving forward, like great excuses. And meanwhile, we have to show up for our lives. So what you do with that shadow and eventually your other shadow, who we might get to in this podcast, the inferior shadow.
So cool. What did I sign up for?
Exactly. Well, we'll see. We'll see if that wants to happen. But is you say to your shadows, so long as we use this moment to practice staying connected before, during, and after the podcast, I, ego, promise to consider it a victory, irrespective of the results.
I love that.
And that's
there's no failure. There's no failure.
And we have to put that metric in the right place. Yeah. It's a practice. We don't always feel that way or believe it, but you do eventually if you tell yourself enough times and you practice it.
I love, I said this before we started this, just like the timing of this just feels so, this conversation about shadow work, because I feel like this expansion is, I'm definitely experiencing at the moment with lots of things in life, this series, with work, with life just getting very big, and it's touching the edges of like, holy.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you've got a book coming out.
Yeah, no, me too. Sometimes it feels awesome and sometimes it feels like super terrifying.
But the shadow side of that being, you use these words, shadow is the gateway. What do you mean by that?
Are we filming?
Yeah.
Oh, we are filming.
Yeah, this is all being filmed.
Oh, I didn't know.
I already had some great stuff in there.
Oh my God, I had no idea. It's like, oh, I hope I can re-say that. Okay, so the shadow is the gateway.
The red lights.
I know. Oh, that's the indication. I'm glad I'm like not even.
So perfect. I should have just said no and just been like.
Yes. God damn.
There was actually some great stuff in there already.
That's awesome. Well, you're very easy to talk to. Let's see. So the shadow is the gatekeeper. So the way I would explain that is mostly we are identified with our waking conscious ego identity. So that's how I think of myself. I'm a mother. I have 2 sons. I grew up in Kansas and Boston and California. It's my waking conscious identity. It's my story about myself, my perspective on myself. And the ego really kind of lives in the left brain. The unconscious is in the right brain. It's a whole other dimension of our intelligence that we don't really tap into. We're not really taught how to do that or respect it in this material world that we've landed in, modern kind of era. Doesn't give us a lot of gateways to the unconscious. Psychedelics do that. So we I feel like I should zoom out a little bit. So we have this narrative about ourselves, and largely what it's made up of, the tricky part is that everybody has shadow. So we all have parts, like no matter how good or bad somebody's childhood is, shadow is universal. We all encounter experiences, things in our development that are either too confusing, too painful, or just unwanted. So the shadow, whatever the ego doesn't want to deal with or can't deal with, gets pushed into the unconscious. That's a universal human coping strategy, survival strategy. So everybody pushes some stuff about themselves. To be more concrete, maybe you grew up in a family where it wasn't safe to be angry or express sexuality. So your sexuality or your anger, gets pushed somewhere. It doesn't go away. It has to get offloaded somewhere. So it gets pushed into the unconscious, and a shadow forms to carry it for you, an alter ego self. That's the thing. It doesn't go away. Meanwhile, we keep moving on in our lives as if that doesn't exist and didn't happen. But another way a shadow could form is my cat died when I was 5, and it was excruciatingly painful. This didn't actually happen to me.
I was getting that. I was like, oh, sorry.
But it could have. Or a parent, right? Yeah. But it doesn't really even matter to a kid. Those could be equal griefs. That unmanageable pain, like, we have to survive and keep going in our lives. So that could easily get split off. It doesn't happen universally. Some people have a constitution to manage and metabolize pain and grief, or maybe they have parents who are walk them through a process. But that could form shadow. The grief over your lost parent or pet goes into, the unconscious. It's also cultural and environmental beyond just family systems. So if you grow up in a culture where it's not okay to be gay, or let me make it more concrete. You're supposed to kind of be tall and thin and blonde. Those qualities of self, or thin, your shame about your body and just body image, all of it can go into the shadow. Yeah. So, and it just collects steam and energy over time, and we become kind of a house divided. And nobody really realizes that. We have to secure belonging. We have to fit in. We have no agency or autonomy, and we don't have a lot of perspective in childhood. We only know the reality we're born into, but we must secure belonging for survival. So whatever we deem unwanted or unacceptable to the environment goes into the unconscious.
It doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then but it doesn't go away.
And how does that manifest in if someone's not willing to look at that part of themselves, how does that manifest?
So many ways. It's not sustainable to be at war with yourself, but that's ultimately what's happening, is that you are pitted against a part of yourself. And so how does that feel? Number one, it doesn't feel good. Kind of feels like a low-grade sense of, you carry a stain. Something's bad. Something's wrong. I'm different. I don't fit in. And everybody, I feel like such a incredible privilege of having this front row seat to a lot of kinds of people. Celebrities, people you would imagine don't have shadow because their lives seem so great, So it could manifest as just a low-grade feeling of, badness, shame, inferiority. Something's wrong with me. Why do other people seem to get it? I don't. But it could also manifest as like a takeover, like something from the subconscious, your shadow, occasionally pokes through the surface and drives behavior and perception. So that happens all the time to people. You know, shadow takeovers, that's behavior, that's acting out, that could be lashing out, but it could also be paralysis and stuckness and ADHD and procrastination. Those are things in my work I work with as shadow and, you know, kind of get at the root of what's driving that kind of, you know, motivation. What's the motivation for that?
I feel like so much of, you know, you start letting the hood on inner work and exploring kind of what are my values and skill sets and what it is that I want to do in the world. And a lot of the theme of these conversations have been around finding a sense of purpose and a lot in work, but not, I mean, it feels weird having work as a separate thing because it's so, what's this aligned life? There's so many encompassing things in you. And I feel like the shadow side, I'm starting to see a lot more people talking about. I don't want to call it trendy because it's kind of, that almost like dismisses it, but it's
the zeitgeist.
It's a zeitgeist.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely, you know, becoming this thing where I feel like it's not, you know, doing this healing journey isn't just crystals up your butt and rainbows.
Yeah.
You know, it's being willing to look at this stuff.
Absolutely. And it has so much power. That's the part that really keeps me coming back. And I didn't answer your question, so I went off on a big tangent, but everybody has a shadow. You asked how it's the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back to, if you want me to, the kind of grounded, tangible nature of this work and how it applies. But basically, you know, so long as you have shadow material that you're unaware of, number one, it occasionally takes you over. It's sabotaging you in ways that you're not aware of. And either, again, filling you with feelings or taking over behavior, driving occasionally. But the other thing is it blocks access. It's in the unconscious. And so you can't really get access to the gifts of the unconscious without really encountering and facing your shadow. Said in the positive, and it is why I come back again and again, like, because otherwise it just would be too, I mean, I really walked away from traditional therapy as I was taught, you know, how to do it, because it felt like a lot of recapitulation of the past and storytelling without a lot of solution. And I really believed people are capable of change. And so what I witness and what is so exciting to me about the shadow is shadow work gives us an elegant, efficient way to root out what is still needing attention. So I have this thing I say all the time, which is we don't actually have to understand every bad and sad thing that happened to us. A lot of that lives on as resilience and grit and character, like great glue that's holding us together. The parts that need attention, reliably, we can get to by looking at what's not working now. Why can't I move forward in the direction of my potential? I'm too depressed. I procrastinate. I'm addicted to something. I'm whatever it is. And, you know, we start in that problem. Whatever today at the surface is problematic takes us back to what still needs attention from the past, the primitive material. And I find that to be efficient, number one. And then what happens is that figure has kind of been waiting for attention. Can you imagine if the shadow, and in my work, we work with the shadow as a real being with its own consciousness and its own point of view. So that's a big mindset shift for people. I'm not unitary. I'm not just my ego. I'm not just my identity as I think of myself. I share consciousness with my unconscious. And in my unconscious are shadows, are other parts.
Yeah, it's funny, just like, I never, I guess, worked with someone specifically on the shadow, but it was an exploration that did happen in the last few years for me, kind of by default. And even just, I think, I mean, I guess the most major one is like finding a voice. As growing up in the UK, there's a different kind of energy in the US, and I love being out here. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but there is so much weight of history growing up in that part of the world. And that weight of history has oppressed the feminine for so long. And I'm not saying it's not oppressed here, but there's just like there's a historic thing there. And so this idea that I even had a voice or I had anything useful to share, rather than like deferring to, you know, the masculine side of stuff. And then, oh wait, I'm a singer, you know?
Yeah.
And so that whole journey of like, I look at even just the tone of my voice, how I was singing 4 years ago, to now, it's like it's dropped a whole different set. I'm recording music tomorrow, and I'm just like, I'm playing some of the stuff I used to play, and so I'm playing it in a high pitch. I'm like, this is way too high. Wow. But for me, it was like, it was the darkness around like, wait, like not just I have been trapped in my body without a voice, but like generations before me have been trapped without a voice.
Yes. Yeah. And so I love that. And that is very much what the experience, I mean, there are a lot of ways into this work. Shadow work is not the only path in, and it leverages, I mean, I like to say, like laws of the universe, like the mechanics of the universe. And so you found a way to make peace with, make amends with, find separate from the pain and what you learned and what was coded to you as like, you need to have this high voice if you're a woman, you found that which is true for you, which is really what shadow work is about. It's unearthing that original blueprint of who we are, separate and apart from what we learn to become safe, to secure belonging and acceptance, which is really a program the ego runs. If this, then that. If this, then that. It's like a code. It's a matrix, and it really, influences how we see reality and what we perceive as possible. And shadow work, again, just to simplify, you found a way of doing that, takes you to the parts of you that are carrying these primitive assumptions and fears about, who I have to be. And as you encounter that part of yourself, the favorite part of, the work is like you actually have a real relationship with your shadow, the part that got shut down. I always think of like an insect in amber. Like you find those shadows and they're frozen in time. They're stuck in the past until the ego brings attention and curiosity, partnership, love, light, attention. And guess what? Who knew? But you can talk to these parts and they'll talk back. That's an art form we've really lost in modern times. Call and response, like ask and you shall receive. Like you get answers back from these shadows, and they have expansive intelligence. The part of our intelligence, our right brain, I say, carries the eyes, instinct, insight, intuition, ideas, images. I think I said instinct, inspiration. It's like this very expansive mode of our intelligence. It comes through the right brain. It's just different. It's not logical left brain, analytical, critically, analytical intelligence. It's a different quality of intelligence, but it's certainly as legitimate. And in my experience, it's the more expansive mode. Like now I wouldn't do anything without the board members, like enlisting my shadows to see and perceive where we should go, what we should say yes to and what we should say no to.
And I guess, is that the unlimited version of you that's then like allowing that to come through?
Yeah, and there's a symmetry, which is kind of crazy. Thank you. I was hoping you would do that when I start to show more than I'm. That must.
I know that was the microphone, not the boob.
Okay, good. I was like, your sexy shadow is showing up.
No, bring the sexy shadows out. It was more a microphone.
Okay. Did we get it? Did I get it?
So yeah, okay. It was on the necklace, so I'll wave, but it wouldn't be it.
Well, there's a symmetry. Yeah. So the more we live in harmony with that mode of our own intelligence, kind of like, I think of it as like, I mean, you could live your whole life just using your left leg and your left arm, but like, why wouldn't you use the right side of your body? That's kind of what it's like. But there's an ego death that is called for. It's very unfamiliar and foggy and requires a lot of trust and faith to bring this alive, to like suspend disbelief. Now, what I will say, I feel like I'm selling it. I get so excited about this stuff, is that you don't even have to believe it for it to work. That's the whole thing. You just practice and you get, this is the unlimited part of our intelligence that doesn't perceive, I always say, where the streets have no name, like past the limitations of, the created world and the worlds we grew up in. It's imagination, and it's the key to that part.
I shared this I shared this earlier with you. I had a guest on here earlier this week, and I didn't mind sharing this because whatever. But I definitely caught myself just the way that she carried herself. It was like a powerful woman who knew herself, and she built, a very successful business and held that capacity. And there's a part of me which is like, oh, like I feel the edge. And one of the things that came up is, have I shared with you about this whole Glastonbury dream?
No, the what?
Glastonbury?
No.
Okay, so part of this where I see my shadow self coming out of is, so I hit my rock bottom in beginning of 2020. And part of that was I went dancing. I was using psilocybin, which I'm not on any drugs anymore, but like it definitely opened a gate for me. And I was probably using it in a very inappropriate, abusive way, which I did. But we were dancing at this club, and just I felt the sexual magnetic power, just like it wasn't for anyone else. And I had never danced like this, and it was so. And suddenly I had it was like a 300-person club. Suddenly I had people around me in a ring, and I was like just dancing. Then I was on stage, and I was like, and it felt like this. And I got home that night, and I had this like big magic mirror in my living room. And I looked in it, and I saw myself on stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people. At which point I think I'm fucking crazy. Like the next day I'm like, who thinks that? And for a period of time I did think I was crazy. And I think that's part of the battle of this crazy burnt at the stake, that whole thing of like thinking. But then I set my sights, so I'm like, Glastonbury. You know the festival Glastonbury in the UK? It's like the biggest UK festival.
I've not been, but I know of it, yes.
I was like, I want to headline Glastonbury. Why not? That feels like the most outrageous, audacious thing that you can ever say. I hadn't even like written music at that point. I hadn't written a song. And so that was 5 years ago. And then I've just been following this breadcrumb trail we talked about.
Yeah.
And a few months later, I was camping in Joshua Tree, ended up camping next to this dude who was a musician. We jammed. He's like, oh, you should come back to my studio when you're back in LA. I was like, okay. Turns out it's Michael Jackson's nephew. And like that had never happened. And we made a couple of songs together, but just like you put out this vision and things just start.
Yes.
It's 2025 now, so it's 5 years later. And maybe that happens in my lifetime. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it happens when I'm 80 years old. But even the idea of the audacity to say, it's the audaciousness that feels like this. How dare you? How dare you say something so ridiculous? But that feels like the shadow part of me, which is like,
yes,
you know.
And I think while being in an ego and a body, it's really healthy to practice letting that be a shadow. We talked about before we started recording that, or maybe it is on film, since I am so confused.
It is.
That shadow, who sounds like the same shadow who was present in the bathtub shadow was present in that club.
She had headlined Glastonbury.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. And so it's really healthy to keep that as a shadow and let the ego practice humility and ignorance.
Yeah.
And pass credit through to this expansive, non-material, dare I say, spiritual dimension of ourselves, where we're hooked up to something much bigger than our individual intelligence. That's healthy, kind of right relationship. Then you get to, be in awe and on an adventure your whole life, and you can, operationalize a relationship, even though that sounds very clinical and not warm, but you can operationalize a relationship with your right brain through your shadows and relate to them and share your consciousness with them. And that phenomenon that you described, I mean, another one of my little phrases is, if we allow it, our shadow can orchestrate pathways and possibilities that are unreasonable and illogical, that don't make any sense, that are much faster and more efficient and more synergistic, kind of like biomimicry, the intelligence of the natural world, and, kind of this feminine dimension of our intelligence. I mean, those are limited buckets. Masculine is left brain logical, and feminine is right brain mysterious, more, circular and foggy. So I don't really love the labels, but that's kind of how we've thought. I do think there is a truth to that this mode of our consciousness, even as a human species, is less legitimized and less accessed. And it can take us, I mean, what I love about it in this book that I'm writing is it's the creative problem-solving engine of the human being. And so it carries vision and innovation and solutions to really complicated problems that egos and humans cannot solve alone. So I think that we need a relationship, with the natural world through the right brain,
How, and in terms of like people building businesses, how do you how do you see the shadow comes up when people are, founding businesses and growing and scaling and working at that exact level?
I mean, I'm kind of I don't want to say a boring story around this, but I do the same thing with people. I have so much confidence and faith and trust in the shadow that, first of all, everything's connected. So somebody might come in talking about a relationship, and what we find and discover applies everywhere, will have impact in every area of their life. I'm looking for the internal hidden leverage in a human being. So I go to shadow because that reliably is going to give us the solutions that this, individual, hypothetical individual can't really evolve. So if somebody's stuck and not able to expand and bring their vision to life, we're looking for where that blockage is. I will say, and this is an important caveat, we don't, sometimes people are on the wrong path. That happens. That's a real thing. And the universe is a pretty reliable feedback loop. So when we do have to practice non-attachment. Like sometimes you just are like Glastonbury and, if I don't hear any of that in you, I think there are a lot of versions of that would really turn your shadow on and give you an experience of like, expansion and satisfaction and joy in this lifetime. So we can't get too attached to the specifics of our visions, but it's reliable that when we start, we get in harmony with our shadow instead of, continuing this kind of unwitting warfare, the solutions emerge. Green lights happen, both internally and externally. I mean, I have a story that would make this a little bit more concrete. Please. I tell the story in the first chapter of my book, at least so far it's in there. And it's one of my favorite stories. It's not specifically about, like a startup, but it was someone who came to me at middle age who was a criminal prosecutor and had been practicing for 30 years and was pretty miserable, just really didn't want to do that any longer, but was really attached to the life he had created, didn't want to, be empty-handed. That was his support in life, his viability. And he just couldn't see how to change at 55 years old, And so, I love his story because he was really one of my hardest customers. Like, such a logical, analytical, left brain dominant person who decade after decade leverages that part of himself. Like law is that, the rules. And so he was tough because, I'm like, every time I'd have him close your eyes and, go into a memory or whatever, and we're sourcing, rooting around. Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh my God. But he had a really powerful mentor who worked with one of my mentors who had said, you got to go see this person. And so he was going on the ride. He was drinking the Kool-Aid, basically, and he was paying me a lot of money to drink the Kool-Aid. So he did it, was the point. And one day when he had his eyes closed, he, this image of an amusement park came into his mind. And I said, does that have any significance to you? Like, what does that mean? And he said, oh, when I was a kid growing up, there was a Great America amusement park was built in my neighborhood. And when we and then suddenly, actually, that image changed to an image of the Ferris wheel at the Santa Monica Pier. Okay. And I said, what do you make of that? And he goes, I think I should go ride the Ferris wheel. And I said, okay. And then very quickly he was like, but how do I know if that came from my shadow? He was new at it, which is very common for people to be like, am I making this shit up or did that come from this shadow? And I said, we'll act as if that came, like in the beginning, it's going to feel really foggy and mysterious. So actually what I said to him was, would you ever have had the idea of going and riding the Ferris wheel? And he said no. And I said, well, then that's your shadow. Let's assume that's your shadow. And he went and he rode the Ferris wheel. So he actually went on a Friday afternoon. This guy, three-piece suit. Yeah, exactly. He did it. And so much of change, I would say the change agent is action. Action is what changes us. Action begets insight. Action begets more breadcrumbs, right? To use the analogy. Like you have to get into motion. So what I'm encouraging people to do all the time is like, yep, it's kind of crazy. It's a, faith-based mission here, but take that intel. The unconscious, the shadow really doesn't make mistakes in my experience. Like, it knows what it's doing. And part of what that young shadow self was wanting for him was just more play, more fun, everything. It turned out, as I got to know this guy, that criminal law was pretty much a reenactment of his childhood. And he was around the cast of characters he grew up with, and he didn't know he was capable of anything else. So when that shadow, that young boy, who initially, when he found that boy, he was like, oh, that fat, lazy, stupid kid. Like, he really had a lot of contempt for his young shadow self because he blamed his, he was lazy in school, and he was, didn't try and just didn't respect himself, as a kid. And no matter how hard I kind of litigated with him, like, yeah, but from what you've described about your childhood, like, how could you, it's amazing you're not a murderer yourself, Didn't matter until he found that part and started relating to that boy and following his instructions. Like, now it's crazy. I see this guy still every week. And he, first of all, he went back to law school. He's about to graduate. 2 years in tax law. He never thought he could do tax. It's like really, really hard, too smart. He had to be smarter. And this boy was like, eventually it started with the Ferris wheel. And then about a year into it, he's like, I want to go back to school. This guy went to a prestigious university, took 2 years of his life, invested in himself. And now to the point we're making, like, the business is coming to him. He's ended up with a book of business before he's even graduated. But all of those, I love this idea of, I think it's Buckminster Fuller talks about trim tabbing. It's really like massive change starts in the incremental, right? In the very micro.
Yeah, I mean, he just covered so much. It's just this idea that, firstly, so that I'm understanding this, do you interplay the shadow self with intuition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the shadow kind of brings those qualities. So a lot of people would, call, would think of their shadow as the intuitive part of themselves. Again, in my work, we're bringing this being alive as a 3D multidimensional self versus just like intuition, which is a concept. So it's a lot more kind of vital and alive and, reciprocal. It's a relationship. It's relational work. But yes, it's an instinct, intuition, all of that.
I love the piece that you touched on, which is like the not trusting it. Because stuff, what the psychedelics, my time in them did for me is it started opening up this channel, whereas I started to receive a lot of information. And I started knowing things that I could know conceivably understanding. And I would do readings with people, and I'd read tarot cards, and then I would get this face from them like, how do you know this?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was this, I guess that trust muscle got built over time. Like, a number of times I did that with them.
Yeah.
Whereas I know I can read people's energy. Yeah. I've actually done a few readings in here. I said, pick up a stone. And it's, you do that if you like.
Yes. Can I get
Yes, of course. I'll get the shadow work, you get the reading. But time and time again, like, I would get intuitive hits, or I would get this something, and it's just this trust muscle, which I feel like over time, it takes a long time, or took me a long time to like trust it and be like, oh yeah, I should maybe listen to this.
Well, it's not how we navigate life, and it's not how we're taught to navigate reality. It's really not a legitimate mode or familiar mode of our own intelligence, right? So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's, I think it's just this idea that there's this higher force, or I guess this, I think about my younger self, like this 7-year-old version of me. I've got this photo, which I have on my phone, which is like me with really short hair, and I'm so angry, and I'm just like, that's my face. But, I guess that's kind of inner child stuff. And it's maybe not so much like the expansive version of me. It's where I was.
Yes.
But like, I think about this expansive version of me of where I'm going, and I'm on stage, and I'm like doing all the things, and I'm like in a relationship, and like money, and like being of service, and creating community, and do all this stuff. And I think did I tell you about my peach tattoo? So do I want to tell?
Oh, you did tell me about the beach tattoo.
Do I want to share this publicly? Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think about that.
Did you ask your shadow?
No, I didn't.
You could. And you're making a point that makes me realize I should make a point. So I'm just going to say that out loud so I don't forget. Can we have a chalkboard?
Do you want to have the point first?
No, I think
sure?
I can wait.
Do you remember it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We've got 2 things. Okay.
So I asked about... Yes, we're good.
Okay.
So I had this massage once with this guy called Johnny at the massage place. Like nothing particularly special. But I started seeing this vision so clearly. And it was me. I had like really long hair down to my butt. And then there was this like, I didn't see his face, but it was this man next to me. This like, it was a male force. And I was like, oh. And then I saw myself, I was pregnant. And then I see myself in this hot spring. And then there's like a boy and then a girl. And then fast forward to like many years later, I see myself at his funeral. And I have white hair. It's like white and short. But there's so much, I'm like an old lady at this point. There's just so much joy. There's like rainbows and hummingbirds and, butterflies. And it's just like joy. We had a really joyful life and like lots of people. It was like celebration, just so big. And then a few years later, I saw myself, like when we were kids, we had this, I really took it for granted at the time because looking back, I'm like, holy shit, the most incredible fruit and vegetable garden ever that you can ever imagine. And we had these rows of strawberries and we would come home in the summer, and maybe I've idolized this in my head, but we would come home from school in the summer for like 2 weeks in like first couple of weeks of June, and we would just like feast on these strawberries in the ground. And so we'd get like strawberry stains all down our, school uniform. But I saw myself as an old lady in this vision eating strawberries. And then I had like short white hair, like old. And then I stood up and I walked, and walking was a big thing for me because I've had lots of issues with my ankles, and I was told I'd be in a wheelchair when I was a kid. And so like the fact that I walked, and there was this tree, and then underneath it was this picnic blanket that we had as kids. And on it there was this peach. And I picked up the peach and I sat down, and then I ate the peach, and I just tasted all the sweetness of life that I had been brought in all these years and all the beauty. And I laid back down, and the light was coming through under the leaves. And then I asked, what year is it? And I hear 2085. So I'll be 95. So it was like the spring of 2085. And then I said, I choose that death. That is the death that I want. And I've had that vision for a couple of years, and I got my peach tattoo because I'm like, I'm holding that. I'm holding that vision. And I really do believe how we think about, I think we can consciously choose, and whether or not that happens, hopefully, I don't die tomorrow, but I'm holding on to that idea of when I think about this most expansive version of me, I think about that old lady who's like, she's the one who's guided. She's the one who's put all these breadcrumbs down.
Yes.
And she was the one who was like on stage and like doing all the things.
Yes.
And she's got this place in life where like peach and strawberries and walking, and that's it.
And you could, so there's the version of the shadow who's in the bathtub, and I'm not totally clear if she's the version of you on stage. Maybe they're the same, maybe those are 2 shadows, but this future self shadow, I mean, she can be a separate shadow, and you can ask her, for guidance. Like when you don't know what you want to say yes to or no to in any context, like you can really enlist these beings and ask. Like we just have forgotten. We don't know that if we ask, there's so many answers, so many solutions that can come through these beings. And again, we have to bring them alive with consciousness, with attention, with legitimacy. Like that's the big key. But there are 2 points I wanted to say which feel important. I would want people to know this. One is about trust, the trust muscle, but I'm going to come back to that one because will you hold that for me?
Yeah.
The other one was, we really jumped into when you and I went to your shadow, we went to this very expansive, powerful shadow self. In my work, Phil Stutz's name for that shadow is the evil shadow, interestingly, not because it is, categorically evil, but because the ego tends to judge the qualities of this shadow. It creates the shadow because those qualities can feel uncivilized and evil to the ego. So often qualities like, power, control.
Yeah, it's like power. It's like a power woman.
Yeah.
That feels so scary and intimidating.
Yes. And the good news is what I, again, like kind of love about the shadow framework is you don't have to be her. I have an evil shadow who absolutely like wrote the book and sold the book,
It's your evil shadow.
I don't have to, it was totally my evil shadow. I mean, I sound cuckoo bird, whatever,
Shadow,
but I wouldn't have, I mean, I didn't get that done. That was all driven by her. I had to take, now the other part, the part I had to work with to keep her safe, because there's the other part of me that's just scared. We call it the inferior shadow. That shadow carries vulnerability, shame, guilt, despair, grief, those kind of qualities of emotion. So those are like the two main shadows. There's the shadow that, again, good news is you don't have to, like, I don't have to want to exercise power over people or think that I'm like, exactly. And I don't have to be like righteously superior. But there is a part of me, I love somebody said, in order to be a writer, to write a book, you have to have some narcissism. Like you kind of have to be a narcissist because you have to believe that you have something that people should listen to. Yeah. And you have to organize time and space around that, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to be, I like my personality. I like being, humble and, somewhat self-deprecating. She's moved me in her direction a little bit, to be honest, which is nice, to kind of have dropped some of that, kind of smallness and, to be a woman and be safe. I need to be, not too loud and not, too smart. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, no shade to the Midwest, but like the messaging in my growing up was like, while being female, don't be too smart. Don't be too assertive because nobody's going to choose you. Like that's just not desirable. So there was shadow for me around that. But this evil shadow part, who has none of those limitations, who like literally in the writing of the book, I unearthed this shadow who I hadn't met before, who insisted on being on the rugby team the boys rugby team.
You're okay.
I have a shadow who I didn't even know, but this really happened, who was my sophomore, year high school self, who was like, there's not a girls' rugby team, I will be on the boys. And like I was already the wrong side of the tracks at a very, posh school. And like
really scrappy.
I don't even know like how that happened because I was so mostly, even by that point, insecure and just wanting to fit in and, but then there was this other part and she was really helpful with writer's block, believe it or not, because relating to her meant me, I don't even know that I can write a book and I'm, I overthink everything. Like, but is that the right adjective? And should I tell this story or that story? And how's the way into this idea? And then I'd just call her up and she'd be like, I know. And it's like getting in touch with. So I hope that brings alive this idea that like I literally invited her in. It was active. It was like, you be the guide right now because I, ego, am going to just overanalyze everything. And that's good for like paying my taxes, but not so great for a creative process.
I mean, there's a lot of people who talk about that creative process, which is, I'm trying to think about an example, but people who literally overnight, they channel this thing and they say it well.
Yes.
That's actually that's how I feel about some of my songs. Like I look at the words, I'm like, I didn't write this. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It feels like it came out of somewhere.
Yes.
And do you think that's like a thing that women have? Do you think women have to deal with smallness? And I don't want to get too like gendered about it, but I do feel like, and maybe this is just my assumption, that it's just how we have to keep ourselves.
I mean, for sure. I think that probably every human being, unless you're a narcissist, and have more of that kind of disposition, I would say, most humans have that. Maybe it's not smallness, but, some kind of imposter or inferiority. But I think different groups carry like, very thematic shadow material. So I have a women's shadow support group, and I do kind of ironically to me a shadow support group for people of color who asked me to lead a group for them. And it's amazing to encounter, like on the one hand, this is where we are all the same. That's what I love about this work is independent of the degree of trauma you experienced. You know, everybody has shadow, and sometimes what I'm, you know, kind of blown away by and I get to bear witness to in working with people is that, you know, somebody has shadow because they were physically, emotionally abused. That's like a much bigger trauma than the person who comes in and cannot move forward in their life or can't pick up the phone to call the people to start the business, right? Like they're totally blocked and paralyzed, even though they know they want to start the business, just to use your analogy. Their shadow, there are people who come in and their shadow formed in the 3rd grade when they summoned all the courage they had to like perform in the school talent show. And in the 30 seconds before, you know, the lights went down and it came back up and there was no applause for 30 seconds. Like that could create a whole shadow for somebody of like, I'm, you know, not loved. Like that could be so painful. The experience, my point is, of falling out of human warmth and connection and belonging, like it's totally subjective and individual. And it can be as debilitating, irrespective of the degree of trauma. And I'm absolutely not suggesting that there are not massively, you know, more traumatic experiences, but shadow is something every human being has a real, you know, experience of.
I feel like that we're now in this generation of everyone is like looking, I say everyone, but a lot of people is like looking at the shit like, oh boy. Like I have, I've mentioned them like so many times on this podcast, but I'll do it again. I've got my very dear friends, they've just had a baby, and they live a block from me, and Dave, hi Dave, was saying, he actually got me thinking, he was saying, oh, like tickled the kid for like a bit, but he's like, oh, but then we used to stop because, you know, like you're tickled as a kid, and like by your cousins, or I remember my dad like would tickle your ribs, and it was like stop, and like actually the autonomy of the body is now like created so much. So in that really seeing that happen like a few weeks ago, I was like, oh my god, the number of times like with my sisters it was like a tickle fight and you wanted them to stop and you couldn't. That was actually really deeply traumatic.
Right. So there's, you know, there could be a tickle shadow, you know, who felt powerless. And like, but I need to be okay with it to, you know, belong to the sisters. And I mean, by the way, a side point to that is I think it's
also still holding the trust over here, by the way.
Okay, thank you. Well, I didn't even get to the point. We were just about to talk about it. But now another side point is like, you know, I think it's a relief. I am a parent. Like there's no way out of creating shadow, being a part of, like shadow formation is universal. So, you know, you're going to do the best you can, but we all have blind spots and everybody has their own trajectory and it can come from anywhere. Like there's absolutely no version of shadowless humans. It doesn't happen. So, you know, that's too much responsibility and too much power for an individual. That, you know, feels important to me for the parents.
I feel like something that so John Couch, who was here a few weeks ago, he was talking about this, the creative process and the struggle of life is what this whole thing is about.
100%.
Like we can't, it's not about just like living in perfection. It's like we create out of the struggle. So what I'm hearing is you're talking about the shadow is like, oh, is that just the divine struggle that we were each given to then metabolize?
And dark and light, like we're in a dualistic dimension. Like where we landed has dark and light. And, you know, again, like a very humanizing idea, which I believe is a truth, is that there's no perfect, there's no version of reality. You're never gonna arrive somewhere. You're always, no matter, by the way, how much shadow work you do and how much work you do, it's a separate figure. I don't want to throw everybody, but on your like inner critic, your mean part of you that everybody has that kind of weaponizes our shadows, fears against us, no matter how much consciousness you have, you're as you move forward and expand in this life, you're going to keep encountering stuff. And so it's never done. We're never done while we're here, as far as I can tell. It's how we dance with that without projecting that there's a problem, right? Like that doesn't mean that something's wrong or something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
That's the nature of existence.
It's almost like I was actually speaking to my sponsor just before you came in, and she was like, there's nowhere to get. And I was like, oh yeah, I should hear that. There's nowhere to get.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But
and can you live in harmony with that process of becoming versus,
I mean, I catch myself, I guess starting to consciously become aware of the voice inside my head 5 years ago, and then exploring thoughts and behaviors and patterns and all the things. But I catch myself thinking that there is somewhere, like at one point, I'm going to have fixed all my stuff. I'm going to have the money, the relationship. I'm going to be so perfect.
Yeah.
And have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And everything's just going to be golden and light and sunrises and everything. And I catch myself in this place of thinking, oh, at some point I'm going to be done excavating. At some point I'm going to be done with either step work or looking at this part of myself. And I think, this idea that we've shunned pain and we've shunned the struggle is a bad thing. And now getting to see that that's like, there is in the 95 years I have on this planet, what excites me, and I guess kind of this is where the Glastonbury, what this represents for me, is like how much growth, how much creativity, how much expansion can anyone but me, how can I experience? I said Glastonbury because it was the biggest, most outrageous thing of like, why not? Could that be possible?
Yes.
And I don't know, I feel like there's this place of I just have to catch this idea of like, I truly believe the whole point of us being here is to grow. So where would their growth be if everything was
it'd be frictionless. It'd be like, it wouldn't be this world. It wouldn't be this dimension. And it'd be a lot less interesting on a lot of levels. And we can hold all the things, right? Like there's that brilliant Rilke quote, let everything happen to you. The beauty and the terror, feel everything. No feeling is final. It's like, that's kind of what we're here for. And in the pursuit of growth and fulfilling our potential. For me, the measure of health I'm looking for when I work with people isn't that they're never going to feel anxiety or depression, right? Those are the two poles, right? Like, no, being human, I mean, take a pill and numb yourself if you don't want to be present for this thing, but no, that's not health. Health is not that you never feel sad or that you never feel anxious or stress or stuck or, big feelings. Health is you are moving forward. If you're moving forward in the face of uncertainty, following, versus following your own roadmap, I mean, that's the biggest regret, actually, in contrast to your peach dream, the biggest regret people have on their deathbed, kind of as reported by people who study this stuff, is not having lived true to themselves, leading their lives, making decisions based on what other people expect, want, prefer, desire, some kind of algorithm that doesn't originate in the self. And that's what feels bad. So what feels good and gives us credibility with ourselves and integrity, like integrity, there's another one of those I words, like, it's like integrity is subjective and individual. I mean, their ethics and their morals, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what's the code for you being in integrity? It's different than my code. And only I can evolve that in partnership, at least in my work, with both lobes of my brain, my ego and my shadows. Yes.
Thank you. I love that. I love the bit that you touched upon with the depression and anxiety. Because that's, I mean, if I think about the catalyst of why I'm here, it's, Tom walked into the ocean. He was suffering with anxiety and depression and panic attacks. Whether or not he was suicidal, I have to be careful about that. But I don't think he wanted to live. I think his life was in so much pain. And I similarly was at that same place 8 months later. Like, I remember going to the top of this cliff in Malibu and thinking about jumping off. and I was just in so much pain, and I just didn't want to be here anymore. And actually looking back, I probably would have just like broken a leg and just been stupid if I, like, this is so dramatic. But it did lead me on this journey of, I ended up in a therapist's office, and I felt worse coming out of that place because it was just like an intake thing for an hour. And I was like, can't you tell that I'm like feeling suicidal right now? And I just felt so, and there were other experiences that I had, but I just felt like the system failed me. And I was in this place where I felt so lost and abandoned, and what we understood as mental health, I didn't see was helping me. And so that kind of set me off on this trajectory of self-exploration the last few years, to the point where, and I'll bring this back, but, life isn't perfect, but I love it so much. Like, there's so much, I have so many tools, my capacity and, to live it has expanded. And, the vision for this is really, I feel like there's a mental health crisis happening right now. There's not a single person I speak to who doesn't have somebody close to them who is really suffering in some capacity.
Yeah.
And I think we have these labels of depression and anxiety and panic attacks, but we all know what they mean. And so, and especially in the corporate world, or like life in general, I see these companies who are building in the mental health space, and this is my judgmental, there's a fly in here, by the way.
I just saw it, yeah.
This is me being really judgmental and saying like they don't know jack shit about what they're talking about. But I think generally as a human population, it's very, people who know how to navigate those places and come out from the other side, it's hard. But I love what you just shared about the integrity piece, because I think that is the through line of what this journey was. It wasn't prescription pills for me that helped. I know there is a time and a place for that.
Absolutely.
I know talk therapy has a place, but there was so many other modalities of this journey. And I think the aspect of, this unconscious, the shadow side of it, or whatever word you want to use to describe it, it was so critical. But being able to live in that place from integrity of like, what do I really want in this moment?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about it from, your perspective, working with people who do have those symptoms of depression, anxiety, and panic attacks and lostness, like how this work kind of shapes their perspective on life.
Yeah, I mean, that is a lot of what, presents in my practice when people come. Not everybody's coming. I work with a lot of creatives and a lot of people who start wanting to expand. But a lot of people who are just coming, because they can't, put one foot in front of the next. And I mean, my experience is that helping them get in touch with their shadows does evolve, paths forward that really address, as they find, the kind of, the shadow takes them back to the root of those symptoms. I mean, one of my mentors, I've had the privilege of getting to work with two really brilliant men. Phil Stutz is one, and Barry Michels is the other. And Barry says a pretty, it is a big statement, but in the shadow workshop that we've taught together many times, he makes the statement, most psychological problems of the modern era come from forgetting our shadow. I mean, it's similar to like what Nietzsche identified when he said God is dead. That was like the scientific revolution. We're pretty much scientific materialists, and we don't know that there is anything. We've lost our connection to the mystery and the majesty of the world. We've lost a legitimate way to relate to it. I mean, creatives, like imagination is the friend of, or people, creatives have permission, and innovators, visionaries have permission. But everybody, this kind of reminds me of Elizabeth Gilbert's work, like everybody is creative, like everybody needs to be a healthy relationship. So going back to, I find so often when people come with depression or anxiety or procrastination issues, ADHD, like some of the more kind of common garden variety psychological symptoms, shadow work really gets them moving. and the process of bringing the lost, abandoned parts of themselves, that are now kind of creating these stucknesses, really does shift people, it addresses those kinds of problems.
Do you want to come back to the trust?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's actually a good segue. So what is true is that this is a different way of conceiving of the self that requires a bit of a mindset shift. So this, going back to the idea that I'm not just my ego and how I think about myself, to actually get on this ride, and legitimize these shadows and give them voice and point of view and their own storyline, is a bit of a stretch for most people in 2025. So meanwhile, thank God, you don't actually even have to believe, you just have to do. So, but mostly the ego has a limited tolerance for how much risk it will take, as directed by this guy over here, really, So what happens though, pretty reliably, is that the shadow's wise. The shadow knows us from the inside out. It doesn't even, it knows all my foibles and hangups and limitations that I'm really committed to. So it doesn't give us and you don't, by the way, you don't have to, it doesn't say okay, leave your marriage. You're not happy. You have to quit your job. No, it's pretty smart. And we devise also strategically very small incremental risks and actions that an individual can take to start to gain trust in this process, gain trust in their shadow. By the way, the shadow has to trust the ego too. Often what happens is I always liken this kind of a dynamic. It's not universal. This doesn't happen every time with people, but many shadows are kind of like the Matt Damon character in Good Will Hunting. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not talking to you. Mad at the ego, because the ego, again, even if unwittingly, has been suppressing, denying, ignoring, rejecting the shadow. So the shadow's I don't trust you at all. So there's a trust process. There's a trust that the ego has to learn and gain in the shadow. The shadow has to trust the ego, and the ego has to trust this process. The process has to be trusted.
I feel like such a common thing that I see is everyone damning the ego today.
Yeah. I don't, so in my framework, the ego is not categorically bad. The ego, I think of, my definition is, it's like the executive power of the self. It does control the resources in the material world. So it kind of mediates our relationship to this world. The shadow's in the interior world, in the unconscious. The ego is the executive power that directs all the resources in the material world: time, attention, money, energy. So the ego, so what's interesting is it's like a buddy movie to me, because the ego has to get the marching orders from the shadow to get the big blueprint. Sure, ego, you run your little math-based formula, and guess what? You're just going to keep proving the same theorem all over again. If you're only willing to take action based on certainty, which is what the ego wants, certainty, control, predictability, you're going to end up getting the same results over and over again. You don't expand. The shadow can bring the expansive kind of blueprint and set of ideas for how to lead the highest integrity, most expansive life. But here's the rub. The shadow needs the ego to execute it.
I kind of, the language that I use for the same principles is the higher power and the human self.
Yes.
It's a conscious partnership.
Yes.
And in developing a relationship with the higher power, it's oh yeah, but I have the hands and I got to do shit.
Exactly.
I got to text you and say, hey, you free?
Yeah. Yep.
I have to do the things, and then I catch myself in my monkey mind of oh my God, but what if what's this new?
Yes. And so the ego can be high functioning and healthy, and my belief, when it's working in harmony and partnership, when it recognizes the shadow and respects the shadow, and also is protecting the shadow and the self from that, almost the monkey mind, the mean kind of part of us, that inner critic bully part.
It's fine. It's wild. It's the voices and the journey that I will go on in any single day.
Yeah.
And
it's colorful in there.
It's very colorful.
Yeah.
And like from the outside, I'm like I could be a normal person, but I'm like,
yeah.
And then, but I'm as the day life progresses, I'm like, there's more distance between the things. Like I know I'm doing the things. Like, oh, haha, you're doing that thing again.
Yes, exactly. And that's part of trust, right? You have trust to let those things go and to keep getting back to kind of home base is how I think of that relationship, is like the locus of, of self. The center has to be on the inside, and we can keep getting back there. The more we get back there, the more we, listen and, well, first of all, ask, listen, trust, follow, take a step, take an action, take a risk. And then our worst fears don't materialize because we're running a set of assumptions based on primitive time survival.
I mean, that's my head is always thinking, but this is going to happen. And
right.
It's always the worst case scenario.
That's right.
And when I speak to my dad, who I love, it's always, I look at the way that he talks, but it's always like the worst is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's
and that becomes our inner critic,
Yeah.
Phil, I like his name for it, calls it part X. And the reason that's such a great term is that part, so we as psycho-spiritual beings are subject to the laws of physics, just like the natural world is. So every force has an equal and opposite force. So there's a part of us that has life force and drive and the instinct, the drive to expand and grow. To me, that gets unlocked and unleashed when we start harmonizing with our shadows, when we're not just ego. So as you cultivate a relationship with your shadows, shit just going to start occurring to you and happening. The synergy is going to start to happen. And you as ego have to have the courage to take the risk. And it's got to start, like for the lawyer, it started as the Ferris wheel. It has to have some risk in it to change you, but that was like small enough. I mean, he wouldn't have gone to law school for tax law day one, just like my shadow wanted an ice cream cone. The first thing,
I want ice cream.
Yes. She's like, not a bullshit LA ice cream cone. Like, I want a real ice cream cone. And that was an act of like, let's see if I can trust you. You're going to actually go get the like dairy, sugar, full fat, gluten, like no bullshit. Sprinkles. And I did it.
Sprinkles.
Well, where I grew up, they're called Jimmy's. So she actually said Jimmy's. Yeah, that's the East Coast sprinkle. So we can only do what we can tolerate in the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was a different point I was making, and who remembers what path I was going
down? The capacity of just like, I mean, kind of bring it back to where I was at the beginning, but just this feeling of, I feel like I'm being stretched.
Yeah.
And like I showed up and I was like, okay, but I'm gonna say yes to this podcast place, and I'm gonna pay the money that they want, even though it felt stretched. And then I'm gonna ask people, even though it feels like a stretch. Yes. And what if they say no? And some people did.
Yeah. And you must keep going. The part X is the part of us. So, laws of physics. There we go. So there we go.
Sprinkles.
We have this life force, but we also have an equal and opposite force inside of us, which tries to get us to stop, not move forward. And it'll use anything. Mostly, one of the big ones, one of its big tactics is negative thinking. Just thoughts, negative thoughts.
Do I have, if I want to go to Glastonbury, does that mean I have Glastonbury size like negative thoughts in my head? Because fuck that.
Interesting. I don't know if they're directly proportionate, but probably.
That feels very validating.
But it's what you said. It's like the more you practice identifying it, for seeing it as what it is, like, oh, this is just the part of me that's trying to ensure that I never move forward. Partially to keep me safe, but it's not a very nice part of the self. It's pretty manipulative and dark. It's a bully. That's where kind of, anyway, it's not just, it's not just a little inner critic. It's like a force of darkness, and we have to choose light every day. Every day is that battle.
I feel like that's actually a very empowering reframe in terms of maybe they're directly proportionate, but the vision to create and the capacity of life force and creation is that maybe it is directly proportionate to the level of inner turmoil.
Totally.
And maybe
I love that.
Yeah. In terms of that being a reframe, because I think about where I was in that journey of inner turmoil, and where I feel like a lot of people are today, like if I can reframe that as like, yes, you're feeling this much pain because you have so much to create.
Yes.
That feels very empowering.
I think it's true. If we're not creative, we're destructive, period. And so, you know, the goal, it's not even goal, it's the mission is to not let this part win, to know what it's doing, to not take it seriously and move forward anyway. There's a great tool for that Phil created, where you leverage the force of rage, because you need a force to battle a force. So it's called cosmic rage, which we can talk about at another point. But that is the mandate. And by the way, you know, to a point we were making earlier, no one is ever exonerated of having a shadow or having a part X. Like, that is what it is to be human. That's not going to stop. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And it doesn't mean there's something wrong. That's the nature of being in this existence and being human. It's just a matter of like, you know, you can know that intellectually, but in order to have the courage, what I say is that the shadow unlocks courage, clarity, and energy to move forward as you start to partner, because it takes a tremendous amount of courage to be all in life. Like, that's the truth, to put yourself out there, to take risk and action. We don't have any way around that, but we find a lot of ways to not do that, right? Through procrastination, through numbing, through addiction. Here's another big idea. The way I see it and what I watch play out is that you can either like willfully work with that setup, the game, right? Like, that's the game we were born into. You can either work with that and lean into fear and resistance, get ahead of that, like be okay with that and do it anyway, or you are unconsciously courting hard things to get you to find the parts of you that carry that, you know, energy and light and insight about kind of where you need to go.
So seeing everything as a gift is like a...
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, I'm not saying, there's a big caveat, that every hard thing that happens to somebody they are responsible for. No, there are some random things that happen in life, but we do have a big subconscious hand in a lot of what we're experiencing that gets solved when you work with your shadow, when you turn into the darkness.
Yeah, I mean, just that, the idea that hard things have happened and now I feel very resilient.
Yeah.
In terms of like, other hard things are going to happen.
Yeah.
But I'm not a victim to them anymore.
And you can live through them. Like, what happens as you become someone who lets creativity versus the destructive force inside, that dark force, win out on a daily basis.
Which is kind of this whole thesis, not a thesis, but podcast thesis, that it's the solution to the place I was in, which the world has told me the solution is prescription medication, and I don't even know if there's a solution other than that I'm really being told, but the solution for me was creativity.
It is. It's life force. It's energy. It's putting your seed into something. And really, honestly, any action is better than inaction. So that's it. I mean, and it's not that complicated, except for the fact that people have a really hard time. Again, like, to me, where the shadow comes in is, what is the subconscious? What's the force inside of me that's making that decision impossible? Because we have to move forward. You know, ours is not to question why. Ours is but to do or die. We have to move forward. We don't get a pass. Like, we can, but it doesn't feel good and it doesn't go well. We create a lot of friction when we refuse our mission, you know?
Well, also the idea that I feel so, I don't think she'll mind me talking about this, but my oldest sister, who's 2 years older than me, she came out of school for a year when she was 14. She had depression, and she's been navigating what that means for the last 20 odd years plus. And what I saw, and we have a different makeup in our brain and like how we navigated life, but what I saw was a very helpless way of, not calling her helpless, but like there wasn't a solution, it didn't seem. And then she met Kate, and I think she's having a very different outlook on life, which is really cool. But I think, and talking about Kate for a second, like, and which is related to here, like the tools are so much more empowering. Like, I think we're told this thing around mental health and that you're basically fucked.
Right.
That there's no way out.
Yeah.
You have to deal with this thing. You just have to kind of cope. It felt a very like helpless, despair, no way out kind of environment, and no one really knew how.
Yeah.
And this discovery of holy shit.
Yeah.
It was all in me all along.
Yes.
And I believe it's in everyone. I think everyone has that capacity.
I totally agree. I think it's our nature. We're here, we're creative beings, right? And when we're not working, again, with that part of ourselves, and so many things happen to people to talk them out of that, truth about their own nature, to give them, again, a diagnosis or a label, or you're a difficult kid, and like those things become real albatrosses that we carry that like take root inside of us. To go back to your question, and hi, Kate. Kate is how we know each other.
Yes.
I want to just contextualize who's a brilliant genius of a human being, inspired person. But, you had asked me earlier, and it didn't really come to mind when you asked the question, but I've worked with like, especially a lot of young men with like failure to launch, and they're like, gradations of whether it's procrastination and ADHD or depression and like suicidality, where they have such an entrenched story about themselves and have gone to programs, of kind of development or wilderness programs where, they're kind of taught that it's their fault. And when it's to the point of your reframe, like that there's something in their will that is like making that decision versus like, oh, this pain in me is as great as my mission that I have not yet unearthed. And that makes it sound, a little bit, doesn't really do justice to what the process, at least my experience of the process of unearthing the shadow who's carrying that storyline about that. And it all has an origin somewhere. People don't come in really, constitutionally dark and grief-stricken. That gets coded, through transgenerational. So I guess some people do come in carrying shadow from other generations, but these are, messaging. We're such sentient beings. We catch the signal really early and we carry it inside of us. And as you bring it alive with people, it's amazing. What did I just say? I had renegotiating the past. Like memory is such a pliant thing. There's so much interesting research about, how the brain doesn't know the difference between a lived memory and an imagined memory. We can do a lot of, we have neuroplasticity. We can go back into these young shadow figure beings and show up for them, bear witness to that story that got installed and renegotiate it by standing up for ourselves or, taking our own side, which is so much of what my work is about. And it does, it liberates us from those symptoms, Yeah.
That was good. Any closing words on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was
so much good. Fun to get to talk to you. I love it.
There were so many like good clips on that.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was good shit.
Good.
I really do. Yeah. It's like the reframe. I really love this. The pain is the capacity to.
Yes. I do think it's true. I love that saying. I work with this artist who made me a street sign. He does this like street art stuff, and it's, because I say all the time, if we're not creative, we're destructive, and I think it's that. It's like we have to be in creative forward motion to feel good, and yeah. And in my world, shadows really reliably help us see, I know what I want to end on. There it is. It's not, I don't know if it's the perfect ending, but there's a quote that I really love from the author E.L. Doctorow. I think Annie Lamott, I heard Annie Lamott on an interview actually, and this is how I know the quote, so thank you, Annie. He says that writing, he's talking about writing, is like driving in San Francisco at night in the fog. You can only see 10 feet ahead of you, but you can make the whole trip that way. And I think that is exactly what shadow work is like. And the trail of breadcrumbs, it's like we don't have to have the whole map. We have to learn how to relate to ourselves, listen, trust, and that trust muscle grows over time. You start to have a lot of reference points for all these times that you took the risk and didn't die, overweight, didn't get fat eating the ice cream cone, you know, like didn't, whatever the worst fear is, as that doesn't happen. And I have a lot of data points because I talk to a lot of people. Honestly, 99 times out of 100, our ego's fears don't materialize and we expand. And the handful of times that they happen, we got tools for that. We keep moving forward anyway because we don't have a choice. But most of the time, as you run this program, it gets positively reinforced by life, by the universe, by how you feel inside. And that is self-sustaining. That's like innate, natural intelligence that starts to flow and fire in you. And then you have it as a reference point so that the next time, you know, the person says no to the podcast, like it just doesn't hurt as bad. It's like, oh, yeah, as a creative being, that's going to happen. Like Michael Jordan, you know, missed more baskets than he made, but he's still the greatest basketball player of all time. Maybe. I don't know if that's...
He's the one who said no.
He's the... I knew it. I knew it. That's what I thought. Okay, good. Let's wrap it there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.